On a Champions League night like this, it is never just about the ball. It is about history, pressure, recent scars, and that constant feeling that one mistake can change everything. Atletico came into this with the advantage from the first leg, and with that kind of atmosphere, the Metropolitano creates better than almost anywhere else. Barcelona arrived carrying the burden of having to respond, the weight of a massive shirt. And at the same time, the need to prove they still knew how to survive a proper European night. So before we get into it, subscribe to the channel. Because the idea here is simple. Talk football properly, without fantasy, without hysteria, and without treating the audience like they are stupid. And what does this 2-1 Barcelona win actually tell us? It tells us Barca won the match, but it does not tell us they controlled the tie. That is the difference between a serious analysis and a lazy one. Barcelona had more possession, more territorial control, more volume, and more initiative. But the Champions League is not a competition for good intentions. It demands emotional control, quality in the big moments, and the ability not to self-destruct when the match becomes tense, dirty, and chaotic. And Barcelona, once again, sabotaged themselves. The initial plan from both sides was very clear. Barcelona came out to pin Atletico back, move the ball quickly, press higher up the pitch, and turn pressure into mistakes. It was a side built to attack relentlessly and recover the ball quickly after losing it, trying to turn possession into suffocation. Atletico, meanwhile, played a very Simeone type of game, a structure built to survive without the ball, protect the central zone, close the inside lanes, and use transition like a knife. This was not an Atletico side interested in pretty build-up. This was an Atletico side interested in choosing the right moment to strike and hurt you. And here is a point that deserves real emphasis, because it changes the whole reading of the match. Both Barcelona goals came from Atletico errors and build-up. That cannot be treated like a minor detail. Barca did not just score twice because they had quality in the final third. They scored twice because they pressed, squeezed, and punished an opponent who made serious mistakes trying to play out. At certain moments, Atletico tried to build from the back without the clarity, composure, or security a night like this demands, and against a side that desperately needed to drag themselves back into the tie. Giving away those kinds of situations is practically an invitation to be punished. For the first goal, Barcelona already showed that pattern. They compressed the space, pressed aggressively, forced Atletico into a poor decision, and attacked immediately once the shape was broken. For the second, the same logic applied. Atletico made another error in possession, left Barcelona attacking a broken structure, and Barca were clinical enough to turn that into another goal. So let us say it properly, Barcelona deserved credit, yes, but Atletico helped them far too much. Both goals came from that exact combination of aggressive pressure on one side and poor decision-making on the other. And that reveals a contradiction in Atletico's performance, because in many moments they showed competitive maturity. They knew how to suffer, they knew how to wait, and they knew how to keep the tie alive in the kind of scenario that suited them. But whenever they tried to build with a bit more ambition, they gave Barcelona exactly what they could not afford to give them: short-field attacks, open space, and the chance to grow emotionally into the match. In other words, Barca hurt Atletico far less through long, clean, fully constructed attacks than they did through high pressing and regains in dangerous zones. And here comes the first uncomfortable truth of the night. Barcelona had more possession, more territory, and more attacking volume, and still they never truly controlled the tie. Those are not the same thing. 71% possession looks like dominant, but real dominance is controlling the emotional rhythm of the match, killing transitions, and suffocating the opponent's response before it even begins. Barcelona never fully did that. They had the ball, but they never had peace. And when a team has the ball, but no peace, it is still vulnerable. The numbers help explain that. Barcelona finished with more possession, more passes, more XG, more attacking presence, more passes into the final third, and more touches in the opposition box. But Atletico stayed alive, dangerous, and ready to punish any disorder. That shows the difference between volume and controlled threat. Barca played more in Atletico's half, but they never turned that territorial dominance into real competitive calm. So in the first half especially, the contrast was very clear. Barcelona were the side pushing, surrounding, and trying to turn the match into attack versus defense. Atletico were the side willing to suffer, but always keeping something in reserve to attack the right spaces. And they managed it. Lookman's goal summed that up perfectly. It was not a goal built through control. It was built through aggression, depth, and quick reading of space. Atletico did not need many attacks to show they were still alive. They just needed one good one, and they found it. Tactically, the match was decided in a few very specific areas. First, the wide channels and the half spaces. Barcelona created superiority there, especially through Lamine Yamal attracting defenders and opening space around him, but they did not always occupy the box with enough quality. Second, defensive transition. Every time Barca lost the ball with poor structure behind it, Atletico smelled blood. And Simeone's teams, when they smell blood, do not ask for permission. Third, emotional control. And that is where Barcelona lost the tie again. Because at this point, this can no longer be treated as random. It is a pattern now. Another big match, another Barcelona defender seeing red. Just like in the first leg. Just like in other recent Champions League nights. So this is not just bad European luck. It is a competitive problem. It is a side that, when the temperature rises, can lose its head almost as quickly as it loses control. And in a continental knockout tie, that is poison. You can call it a curse if you want, because the script does repeat itself in a cruel way. Once again, Barcelona fight their way back in. Once again, they get close. Once again, they create hope. And once again, a defensive red card shifts the whole emotional balance of the night. But calling it a curse is too generous. The more honest name for it is lack of competitive maturity. A club of this size cannot keep collapsing emotionally and disciplinarily in major European nights and pretend it is just a detail. And here comes the criticism that has to be made. Some people will look at the scoreline and say, well, Barcelona competed. They did compete. But competing is not enough when you were already coming from an adverse position. Barca needed maturity, not just bravery. They needed to understand the kind of match they were playing. They needed to know when to accelerate, when to calm it down, when to bite, when to breathe. And they did not. They even scored a third in the second half, only for it to be ruled out. And from that moment on, the game drifted into that territory where the head weighs more than the legs. And once again, Barcelona started playing more on impulse than on clarity. In terms of key players within the system, Lamine Yamal was clearly the competitive face of Barcelona, not because he solved everything by himself, but because he was the one player who kept accepting the attacking responsibility without hiding. He carried the dribbling threat, the imbalance, the personality, and the constant feeling that something might happen from his side. Whenever Barcelona breathed, it usually came through him. That is both beautiful and worrying. Beautiful because he genuinely demands the game. Worrying because a club of this size should not be so dependent on such a young player to provide almost all of its attacking clarity under maximum pressure. And this is where Rafinha's absence really mattered a lot. Not only because of his talent, but because of his function, his aggression, his ability to attack depth, sustain pressure, share the attacking burden with Lamine, and offer a second real source of imbalance. Without him, Barcelona's attack became too concentrated on one side, too dependent on whatever Lamine could invent, and more predictable at certain stages. Barca still created, but they created with more effort than they should have needed. They lacked a second blade to cut Atletico open more consistently. On Atletico's side, even without a brilliant performance in terms of attacking volume, there was a lot of competitive maturity. They alternated between deeper phases and aggressive exits. They broke the rhythm when needed. They dragged the game into uncomfortable zones for Barcelona. And above all, they understood the kind of match they were playing. Simeone may not have reinvented anything, but he did not need to. His impact was more about game management than tactical revolution, fresh leg, structural protection, central compactness, and trust that Barcelona's nerves would become part of the story. And they did. And the final stages of the match were almost a raw portrait of Barcelona's mental state. Total desperation, forced crosses, anxiety, very little clarity, and that feeling of someone saved this somehow. That is not control. That is urgency without structure. And when a team gets to that point, it usually means it already lost the invisible battle long before the final whistle. So the conclusion is harsh, but necessary. Barcelona won the match, but they did not win the night. They had possession, they had volume, they had aggressive pressing. They clearly punished Atletico's build-up errors, and they had a Lamine Yamal performance full of responsibility and personality. But once again, they tripped over the same issue. That keeps following them in big Champions League nights. They lack emotional maturity, they lack defensive reliability under high pressure, and they lack a structure capable of carrying these moments without asking a teenager to solve everything on his own. Atletico may not have produced a beautiful spectacle, but they played like a team that understands European knockout football. And on nights like this, understanding the game matters more than decorating it. So what does this tie really reveal? It reveals that Atletico remain a side far more prepared to suffer with purpose. And it also reveals that Barcelona still look more prepared to dazzle in phases of a match than to survive the kind of emotional war the Champions League demands when everything tightens up. And that is not a minor issue. That is a real one. Now I want to hear from you. Did Barcelona go out mainly because of their own mistake and lack of maturity? Or do you think the controversial moments and the wider context weighed more heavily than they should have in this elimination?